A wise man once said, "Forgiveness is divine, but never pay full price for late pizza." Welcome back to Games with Dad. So last time we looked at the first game I ever owned, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And this time we're looking at the first game I ever beat, well, sort of. Like Sonic the Hedgehog, the Ninja Turtles were basically the Beatles to millennials that grew up in the late 80s and early 90s. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird originally started the Ninja Turtles comics back in 1984, and by the time I was born in 1990, they had their own live-action movie, an incredibly popular cartoon series, and like most other popular children's properties at the time, they had their own video games. Now, if you're not familiar, the Ninja Turtles have some pretty strong theming based around family, and curiously enough, most of my memories involving them also involve my family. From opening a bunch of Turtles action figures on Christmas Day of 1993, given to me by my parents, to my grandma Phyllis getting looks from everyone else for giving me a turtle copter on my 4th birthday, my life and the Turtles crossed paths many times. Most relevant to this story is my relationship with my cousins Josh and Jordan. Jordan was born exactly 1 year and 1 day before I was, so our families typically celebrated our birthdays at the same time each year. So on my 4th birthday and Jordan's 5th, we somehow managed to convince our parents to have a party at Chuck E. Cheese, and man, did that place have everything. Cardboard pizza, singing animatronics, a germ-riddled ball pit, and off in the distance, a glorious arcade cabinet with not one, not two, but 4 people playing at the same time. We waited in line for this cabinet for what I'm sure was probably only a handful of minutes, but to a 4-year-old it felt like it was an eternity. But when we finally got through the giant crowd of kids, we couldn't believe our eyes. The most popular cabinet was a Ninja Turtles game. The music was catchy, the gameplay was fun, although I remember the jump button being quite sticky, and Josh, Jordan, and I couldn't stop pumping quarters into that machine. Unfortunately, our parents cut us off. We were on the Technodrome, Aunt Jill, and we left the colorful and exciting pizza and gaming emporium, and we returned home wishing to play with the Turtles just a little bit longer. Little did we know that this Turtles arcade game had been out for 5 years already, and that it had already had an arcade port on the NES. So at this point in time, I didn't have a video game console to call my own, but almost everybody I knew had an NES, and that included our cousin Kurt. But Kurt, being roughly 10 years older than us, really didn't have the patience to be around a bunch of kindergartners, and doubly so when that came to teaching us how to unplug his beloved SNES, with Mortal Kombat 2 I might add, and plug in the aging NES so we could play Ninja Turtles. But eventually Kurt was convinced to give his NES and his handful of games to our grandparents so us younger kids would have something to do at the old farmhouse. Keep in mind, this was in northwest Kansas in the early 90s. There was no internet, no satellite TV just yet, so you got 3 channels, a VCR, and whatever toys you managed to stuff in your backpack. That NES on the farm was a godsend to us kids, and many of those games will be featured here on Games with Dad. And the first to be covered here, and arguably the favorite amongst me and my cousins, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles II, the arcade game. So, if you Google Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES, the first thing that you're going to see is probably the AVGN review from way back in the day on the original Ninja Turtles game and how it was really janky and not good at all. Luckily, Kurt never bought that game, and we instead were blessed with the TMNT arcade game, and almost as importantly, a Game Genie with a code book. That's right, your dad is a dirty cheater. There's no way a group of kids our age could get past the second level in TMNT 2 without cheats, and you can forget about beating the game with just 2 lives and 3 continues unless you are incredibly dedicated. I've only done it once, and that was when I was very bored during my college years before I met your mother. So my tales of this game aren't about a mighty triumph over the odds like Sonic 2, but instead something more social, like sharing good times with others. So getting into the port itself, you'll notice that there are some definite differences between the original arcade game and the NES, and the obvious thing is the downgrade in graphical fidelity. And honestly, that shouldn't come as a shock to anyone, as the original arcade hardware was purpose-built back in 1989 whereas the NES hardware was finalized all the way back in 1983. You'll also notice that the NES is 2-player, whereas the arcade game came in up to 4-player variants. The NES hardware also could not handle the same amount of enemies on screen, as well as the lack of enemy variety on screen at once. The port has to work around these limitations, and honestly the outcome is probably the best possible port that could have been released on this hardware. To make up for some of these shortcomings, the NES edition has much longer levels and actually includes 2 brand new areas with bosses created by Turtles co-creator Kevin Eastman himself. So once you select your turtles, I've almost always played and loved Donatello, you'll notice a small cutscene with speech bubbles, which isn't something that you saw a lot back in the NES days. The first thing that hits you after Michelangelo does the opposite of a superhero landing is the music, and I still prefer most of the NES chiptunes to the actual arcade soundtrack. I don't know if it's due to the simplicity of the compositions, the fact that I grew up playing the NES version more, or if I just like the NES's sound chip. It's probably a mixture of all three, and Konami was incapable of making a bad soundtrack during this era anyways. I'm sure my parents had an over-under on how long it would take to hear the level 1 theme from when we first set foot on the farm. It was usually only about an hour or so. The gameplay is much simpler than the arcade game. The Foot Clan members explode after 2 hits instead of the arcade's 4 hits, but to compensate, the baddies actually have a bit longer of an invulnerability period. So there's a lot more Foot Clan kicking down doors and jumping out of burning elevators than the original arcade. Although they don't get hurt by the giant wrecking balls coming down the stairs. April, you gotta talk to your landlord about that. There's even a bit of a digitized scream before entering April's apartment. The machine gun foot guys are just so weird. Is the gun that heavy that they can't lift it high enough to actually shoot at a usable angle? Also, my cousins and I always thought that the gun looked like a jackhammer. And then this drill pod comes up out of nowhere, and Rocksteady just starts blasting away indiscriminately.
Your pieces.
My gun.
Oh.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang!
Wow.
You really gotta abuse jump kicks on the TMNT bosses, because if you just try to wail on the boss, you're gonna get your shell kicked all over the place. So after Rocksteady has been given the boot, Shredder decides to pop out and kidnap April. Why? And then he jumps through a window. Yes, even if you're standing right in front of it blocking him, he jumps right through you. And you jump right after him and end up on the streets. So next level's the streets, and suddenly it's daytime and the Foot Clan is still everywhere. They're jumping out of windows, hiding behind Pizza Hut signs, and jumping up out of the sewers. Good thing you can bat a manhole back at them. I love how Shredder was able to hack into the TV at the store just to gloat at the turtles. You would expect a loss of detail with the downgrade of NES hardware, but you could still do the fun stuff like scare the crap out of this girl on the skateboard. What I really like about this level is that it isn't just left to right, but there's also an up and down section which helps keep the game's pacing a little fresh. You can even get slammed up against the wall with this hilarious sliding animation. Up next is Bebop, and he will yeet you like a ragdoll if you aren't careful. Give him the old Ralph Macchio enough times and he'll go down for a nap. Now, next up is the sewer, and again, I can't stress enough how much I just love this music. If my childhood had a soundtrack, it would definitely have a fair share of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles chiptunes. This level introduces us to the Hammer Bros, and they hurt. Also, the water shoots missiles at you in certain areas, so if you want to up your score, and you do get an extra life for every 200 baddies you take down, this is a good spot to do it. I'm also pretty sure this moving grate isn't up to code. And we also meet the Mousers. They have terrible hitboxes, they latch onto you and drain your health, and I hate them. Good thing this level's boss does nothing but throw them at us. Thanks, Baxter, you nerd! We emerge from the sewers and we are somehow in the middle of a blizzard. this stage is the first of the add-ons that the NES game made. It's got snow plows, giant ice boulders, and hidden snowy manholes. Why there's so many manholes in Central Park game? We get a few enemies that are only in this level, those being the Robo Snowmen that shoot turtle-seeking missiles and the snowball-throwing Foot Clan members. Before you know it, we're at the boss, Tora. This dude is the one that changed the weather, and he's also the one that's been tossing those stupid ice boulders at us. So kick him in the face, and then kick his stupid weather-controlling disco ball, and spring is here. Time to go get April. Welcome to the luxurious parking lot level. While here, you can enjoy exploding barrels, turtle haters driving colorful sedans, and catering trucks full of robot gang members.
Wow!
So we face off against the David Cronenberg version of Baxter Stockman instead of the double battle against Rocksteady and Bebop from the arcade game. Luckily, it's very easy to get Baxter stuck in a loop. Jump kicks, my only weakness. Oh, and whoever has more points at this point in the game is the one that gets to cozy up with April. But just because we've saved April doesn't mean that we're going to stop playing the game. Shredder doubled down on unnecessary kidnappings and also apparently captured Master Splinter. So Highway 1 has a bunch of Foot Clan blocking the way and is one of the longer stages in the game. We get a bunch of joyriders in what looks like an old Cadillac, a bunch of bikers trying to make us turtle roadkill, random dudes chucking spears. Why spears? You guys have access to guns and dynamite. And these guys that are trying to throw bombs at us. Be careful not to get hit by the explosion when you make them flinch. And if you think walking around with those bombs is impressive, just look at these absolute units carrying monster truck tires. Yeah, it makes sense that these guys can throw monster truck tires and bombs like 10 yards, but they can't hold up a machine gun? Give me a break. Now I know what you're thinking. You know what this game needs? Rocket-powered skateboards. So in the arcade, on this stage, you can actually just stay up at the top and you don't have to worry about like getting hit at all. But we don't have that luxury here on the NES port. So if you kick the helicopters until they explode, the turtle van shows up and immediately runs right off the highway. Great driving, April! So the wrecked turtle van crashes on the industrial zone, and it starts off with Mousers carrying off Master Splinter, and for some reason us kids always thought he looked like a Thanksgiving turkey or a ham or something. The sprite just does not look like Splinter to us. So we get more Mousers, explosive barrels, and a ton of hazards. Are those X-rays, or does this company just have lasers shooting out of their loading docks? That doesn't seem practical. We also get these weird robots that drop from the sky and take 3 seconds to open up before you can hit them. And we get another drill pod, but instead of a boss, we get a bunch of super annoying laser drone things. If you need help hitting them, I always try to base it off of where the shadow is, so you just jump kick at that. After that, you pass the next Pizza Hut poster, and you have these two hover towers that shoot lasers. Yeah, I have no idea why they're here either, but they're guarding General Trag, and it doesn't matter what version of the game you're playing, this guy is a handful. He has a mean left hook, and he loves the smell of napalm in the morning. But if you throw enough quarters or lives at him, he eventually explodes into a pile of now lifeless rocks. And you rescue Splinter before force jumping up the building to Shredder's secret dojo. So the dojo is the second level added just for the NES port, and it is for sure the longest level so far in the game. The Foot Clan come out from behind these sliding doors by jumping up through the nice traditional Japanese flooring, and by also using the world's loudest secret revolving doors. We get 3 new enemy types in this dojo, where we have these sloth-looking ninjas with hunched shoulders that jump all over the place and throw knives, and then we have these laser scorpions, and these ghostly apparitions of tigers that catch fire after being defeated.
Oh my god. I am never gonna financially recover from this.
The worst part about this level, other than the length and repetitiveness, has to be the random spikes that just kind of shoot up from the floor in some areas. But before you know it, we're at the boss, a Shogun robot who is here to protect the Technodrome's secret entrance. I really have no strategy here other than just kind of wail on him and hope that you don't die. His head detaches and it can make your life a living hell. I always try to position him over the secret door because it looks hilarious with his legs just like hovering over this giant opening in the floor.
Wait till you see the... No, 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 no.
You know, even though I had infinite lives the first time I got to this level, I was so incredibly intimidated. The level throws everything at you and the music is just so ominous, but at the same time upbeat and energizing. We get the classic zigzag laser tower things. We also get the hallway x-ray beams, and we've got these giant ice sprayers that just come out of the floor when you least expect it. The devs even remembered the token rule of every beat 'em up. Say it with me, folks. You must have at least one elevator section. It's actually stupid easy to avoid the wrecking balls here. You just have to watch the shadows and then jump when one of them is on the same horizontal plane as you are. A handful of enemies later, and...
FBI, open up!
Metal Soldier. He is no joke. He's basically the same as General Trag, except with rockets instead of a flamethrower. And what seems like a ton more health. So say a prayer, don't touch the electrified door, and you'll make it through just fine. We're on to Krang. The real brains of the operation. Krang is a literal brain alien inside the belly of a giant robot. Listen, man, TMNT was and still is just incredibly weird. Krang will shoot lasers out of his eyes, he'll shoot his rocket fists at you, and he'll punt you into the next area code, usually followed by him flexing on you. I try and use guerrilla tactics here, but my results vary. So after Krang scoots off back into the teleporter to Dimension X, Shredder joins the fight. And in the arcade, Shredder splits off into how many players that are currently playing, plus an extra. So if you had 4 players, it'd be up to 5 Shredders around, and it's utter chaos. Luckily on the NES, it's just 2 Shredders no matter how many people are playing. Otherwise, we'd be here forever. Shredder likes to dodge and counter your attacks, and he also has this weird lightning attack that turns you back into a normal, like, baby turtle. And that's instant death, and I'm sure that caused many a salty game over in the arcades. What I like to do here is knock one of the Shredder's helmets off, and then it's, depending on how many times you hit him, it's typically the other Shredder that's the actual real Shredder. So now that we've freaked the foots, we've mangled the mousers, and totaled the Technodrome, what have I learned and what can I pass along to future generations? Lesson 1. Again, your favorites don't have to be perfect. Like Sonic 2, TMNT 2 isn't the best TMNT game. Not by a long shot. But at the end of the day, I still like it because of all the fun I had and from all the memories I made. It's okay that it doesn't look nearly as nice as the arcade game it was based off of, because this is what I had to play. We never sat there wishing we were playing the arcade game because we were too busy cracking jokes and yelling cowabunga randomly. Lesson 2. Don't be ashamed to adjust your difficulty. I had a snowball's chance in hell of beating this as a kid. And by using a Game Genie, I was actually able to enjoy playing the game. I couldn't believe it the first time I beat Shredder. I was so shocked. I did it. I was the hero. I was so overwhelmed and happy that I ended up crying. I didn't want that feeling to end. I have so many fond memories of Triumph and just messing around with friends and cousins and family, and I wouldn't have if I was just stuck playing the first 2 levels over and over again. Lesson 3. Everything is better with friends. Beat 'em ups in particular can get super repetitive, so if you can bring a buddy along and riff on things, it will just make things so much more enjoyable. So go out there, have fun, and make memories while you still can. And the last lesson for today, lesson 4. If a game is from the late 80s or early 90s, and it was made by Konami, then the soundtrack probably slaps. So that was TMNT 2 on the NES. What are your thoughts? Did you play it back in the day? Is it just as hard as it was back in 1990? As always, don't forget to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you soon with more Games with Dad.